Hi everyone. The last class we have been discussing about batch class and schedulable class. Right? We discussed con expression, schedulable apex, batch class. We have done with one example. And last class we have scheduled the apex class to update the patient class name, right? So we did schedule it. Let me go back and check whether it is updated or not. So what we did last time we scheduled the batch. Update the patient record, what it was doing the logic. Okay, it was updating the system updated by Apex. Right, so when it ran on 28 night 11:59 p.m. And what is the next scheduled run? There is nothing because we have scheduled to run only one day. So let me go ahead and see whether it is updated the patient class name or not. Okay, so click on all. Okay, it is updated, system updated by Apex. That's what it did. And when it did updated, 11:59 p.m. night 28 by this user. Right, that is the time we did scheduled it. If you look at the scheduled job, 11:59 p.m. 28th it started. Right, we submitted on 3:34 p.m. and we scheduled on 11:59 on the same day. No recurring, only one day we wanted to run this job. So same thing we can do it for the recurring as well. Now coming to the next topic, future Apex. Future Apex. What is the future Apex? Future Apex means annotation used to push the method to execute it. That means annotation used to push a method to be annotation used to push a method to be executed asynchronously. Is called future Apex. What is the future Apex? Future Apex means annotation. We use the annotation. Why we use to push the method to execute asynchronous. Or the other definition is, or use the future annotation to identify the method that are executed asynchronously. That are executed asynchronously. Anywhere in the Apex class, if you see the future annotation, what is the future annotation means? Before the method you write @future annotation, @future you will mention. We will see that. So whenever you see that @future annotation, that means if any method is using the @future annotation, that means to identify this method that are executed asynchronously. What are the properties of this? The first one, if developer decides to go with asynchronous, must use @future above the method, right? And the second one, method must be static. Declare the method, future method should be a static. And method type should be a void. That means you have to use the method static void. You cannot use the non-void or non-static. You cannot use if you are going with the future method. And the next one is parameters. What are the parameters that future method is expected? Parameters. What kind of a parameters we have to use? We have must be primitive data type, must be primitive data type, or arrays of primitive data type. Or collections of primitive data type. So if you are implementing a future method, the parameters that are expected for the future method is you have to use primitive data type or array data type or a primitive data type or collection primitive data type. That means future method cannot take the standard or custom objects as a argument or as a parameter. That means I cannot pass a S object or custom object cannot pass into the future method. That means future method cannot accept those. What is this means? Cannot accept. For example, whenever you are writing the Apex class, let me go there. Let me take any example, open resource. Let's take anything, wrapper use. Okay, so this is the one class, okay? So here, this method is having the parameter integer L, integer B, right? So if I need a here account details, I need a account details, okay? If I want account details, what I can do, I can pass a comma, list of account ACC, right? Now inside this, I can get all the accounts. I'm getting it from there, so I can look through the account A equal to ACC, and simply I can get what are the information I want. A dot name equal to update XYZ, and then I can update this information, right? For example, I'm declaring here list of account, update account equal to new list of account, and now I can add this updated dot add A. So finally here I can simply update the database dot update list of S object is this, right? If it is a normal Apex method, if it is a normal method, whatever the data that I wanted from the outside of this method. Okay, if the logic, anything logic is expected from outside of this method, I can pass. Whether it could be a standard object or it could be a list of patient underscore underscore C custom object, I can pass anything here, right? But when I come to the future method, I cannot pass the standard object or custom object or any object data. I cannot pass it in the future method. That means the future method, either it will expect the primitive data type or array of data type or the collection data type. Only data type I can pass, primitive data type only I can pass it. Right? So that is one thing. So in case if you have a question, like if I wanted to pass a custom object information, how can I pass it? If you want to pass a custom object information, how can I pass it? Let's see that with the example. I'll show you that how to pass the object data to the future method. Okay. And the next property is, what is the common pattern? Let's assume that you wanted to pass a record ID. You wanted to pass a IDs. Right? When you pass the IDs, again, you have to query the data into the future method. So common pattern or common structure. Let's see the common structure or pattern. What is a common pattern to pass the method to future method? How can I pass the object details? First of all, let's understand the skeleton structure. Let's understand the skeleton structure. How to write a method? The class name will be same. How to write a method? I have to use a public and it has to be static and future method has to be void. And then I can give any class name, maybe my future method. Now inside this, I can write any business logic. Inside this, I can write any business logic. Can write any business logic, right? And in order to pass the custom object, I cannot pass custom object, list of account, ACC. This way it will not accept it. Instead of this, what I can use is list of ID, ACC ID. So what will happen? It is expecting the primitive data type. What are the primitive data type? ID, string, integer, boolean. So these are the parameters which are the primitive data type. So you can take a collection, you can take an array, you can take a just a sample ID, ACC ID, single ID, right? This way you can pass the data to the future method so that inside the future method you can query the information again. Now let's go ahead and see one example how it works. File, new Apex class, CL underscore today's date 30/06 underscore 2022. So let's give the example of example 1. Future Apex. Okay, so I'll implement first normal Apex class. How do we implement? We write public static void method 1. I can give any name. So right now I'm giving the method 1. So let's assume that I'll just print the data here. I'll not do any business logic because I wanted to show how the execution happens. System.debug. Let's say that method 1, let's say good morning. Next, let's say method 1, good afternoon. Let's say method 3, good evening. Let's skip the method 1. Okay, now I'll copy the same thing. I'll implement another 2 methods. This is the method 2. Okay, and this is the method 3. Okay, now what is the method 1? Method 1, it is printing all the good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And method 2 also printing the same thing. Method 3 also printing the same thing. Now let's see that. Assume that in the method 3, after the good morning, I am calling the method 1. I'm calling the method 1. And after good afternoon, I'll call the method 2. So if I try to execute this logic, what will happen? First, it will print the method 3, good morning, then all of this will be printed, then afternoon, then all of this will be printed, and then method 3 will be printed, right? That is the sequence which will be printed. Now let me go ahead and execute it. This is the class, copy, debug, open. Okay, now this method is static method. Right? If it is a static method, I can directly run class name dot method name. I need not to initialize it. I need not to initialize it. I can directly take the class name dot method 3 because this is a static method. Execute. Right, perfect. Good morning, then 1, then good afternoon, then 2, then 3. Right? This is what it is executed. Now, in case if you are taking the static method, if there is a static method and you try to initialize it, what is the error you are going to get? It is, let's say AP equal to new. This is the affix class. I'm initializing the class right now, or initializing the object now, AP dot. If I try to execute it, this way it is going to scold me, saying that static method cannot be referenced from non-static context. That means this is a static method, and whenever I initialize it, it will go in a non-static method. So that's the reason always use the class dot the method name. If you have a method name as just a static. If it is a static, use the class name dot method for the execution. Now let's go back to the result. So this is the result, I got it. Let me take a snippet. Perfect. So now what is happening here? First, it printed the method 3, good morning. Method 3, good morning. Then after that, it printed the method 1, right? And then it printed the method 2. Perfect. Method 3, then method 1, method 3 again, and method 2, method 3. Now here, what happened while execution? What happened here, execution? All the data is executed in synchronously. All got processed in synchronously. Right, all got processed in synchronously. Step by step it took. First the cursor came here, executed, then cursor went here. So that means cursor went here, 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 and came back, executed the next one. Now again it went to the method 2, cursor executed line by line, and it came here. So once it is completed the first line, then only it went to the method 1. Now once method 1 is completed, it went to the next line. Once this good afternoon is completed, then only the cursor went to the method 2. Okay, so everything processed in synchronously. Now suddenly as a developer, I felt that method 3 is going to take some time, because method 3 assume that there is a lot of logic which is there inside that. Inside method 3, there are a lot of logic that has been need to be executed before starting the method 2. But I do not want to wait method 2 execution. Whenever the method 3 execution started, parallelly I wanted to execute the method 2 also. Parallelly I wanted to execute the method 2, because before calling the method 2, there are some logic which is going to take a lot of time. Now, how I wanted to run, like I wanted to run method 2, method 3 parallelly. So in those scenarios, we have to use the future. Now, one more thing here, observe, whenever we executed, it created the only one log, right? Now I will show you after declaration of the future method, how many logs gets created. Now, method 2, I wanted to start parallelly, right? If I wanted to start parallelly execution, then what I'll use on top of method, I use @future. I use @future. That means what is happened right now? This is synchronously it will execute. This is also synchronously it will execute. This is also synchronous. But here we have a method 2, which needs to be executed as a asynchronous, right? That means this has to go in separate thread. Separate thread. This has to go separate thread, and this has to go separate thread. Can you hear me, guys? Are you able to hear me? Hello, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, Swapna.
I think there is some problem net connection. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Swapna.
Okay. It's still just a second.
A screen is not showing, ma'am.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so everything is processed synchronously. Now, if I wanted to run, if I wanted to execute the future method parallelly, right? Method 3 and method 2 has to execute parallelly. So what I did till this point, everything will be executed synchronously. But when it is started here, like it will jump on immediately as soon as the method 3 is reached. Let me show you that. Okay, saved, debug. Now let me execute the method 3. Perfect. Now click on execute. Now see what happened. It created the two logs. This log was earlier synchronous one. Now it created one is synchronous log and another one is asynchronous log. In synchronous, what happened? In synchronous one, if I open the synchronous one, see, it printed the third one good morning, and then one it printed, directly it printed the third good afternoon and good evening. It did not print the method 2 because method 2 parallelly started along with the synchronous one. So that has only these things. Now let me take a screenshot. And another one, we have a asynchronous one. Right here, method 3 executed, and then we have a method 1 here. So which is perfectly fine. So this execute till this point executed perfectly fine, right? Method 3, good morning. Method 1, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Now the method 3 is also printed the good afternoon. After that, what are the method 2 is there? That went into completely different process. It ran into the different process. And so this one did not care about it because it has to process in the different thread. Then it executed the next one here. See this now, let me divide. So this is synchronous and this is asynchronous, right? So whenever we implement a future method, we will have always a log which says future handler. That is a asynchronous log. Now, if I implement this @future for the method 1, so what will happen now? 3 logs are going to create it. Let me clear all the logs. Now debug, execute method 3. Click on execute. Total how many? 3 logs are going to create it. One is synchronous log and 2 are asynchronous log. Now if I open the synchronous one, it will give me only the method 3. And the next one, asynchronous one of them will give method 2 and another one will give method 1. Because all are processed in different thread. Got it? So right now, method 1 executed separately, method 2 executed separately, method 3 executed separately. But here, method 1 and method 2 are asynchronous, method 3 is synchronous.
Uh,
Any question?
Swapna.
Yeah,
So method 1 and 2 you mentioned annotated with future, right?
yeah,
So method 3 is an synchronous process. So
yes.
how method we will know that whether method 1, method 2 was executed, because in a synchronous, based on the previous methods only, it will run the method, right? Whether it will execute or not, then only it will execute. It will wait for the previous execution. How it will know the method 1 and method 2 will execute or not?
No, this doesn't care. Whenever I mention iterate future here, that means whenever there are two rules are there. Okay, whenever I mention the asynchronous at the rate future, that means synchronous does not care about it. It has to run in parallelly different thread. Now, whether it is ran or not, this need not to know that, because as soon as it failed, it will fail into the asynchronous, right? So that's the reason what we do is whenever we are doing the DML updates, we have to be very careful on the future method. If you are calling a future method inside the synchronous call, and if you are doing the DML operation here, let's assume that I'm updating something at the rate future, okay? And here I'm updating some data, ACC, I'm updating it. If your update needs to be wait for the future to complete it, then don't write in that way. Both are in different route together. Okay, because this will execute fast. So what it will do, it will come here, the cursor will come here, it will execute it. As soon as it find it, it says that future, okay, I need not to care about the asynchronous. So immediately it will go here, here, here. And when you are updating it, by that time, future method might not execute it, because it might take some time. Whenever the resources are available at the background, backend, then only it will execute this future method. So do not write any DMLs after the future method is executed. Then you might run it here. Okay, in the real-time scenario, when we use a future method, whenever we wanted to have a long execution, okay, let's assume that need not to wait for anything, like user need not to wait for the output. That means if you do not have an immediate result, I'm not expecting any immediate result, then we can go with the future method in the real time. But if you want an immediate result that needs to be updated or DML that needs to be updated, do not go with the future method. That means user is updated the account details. Okay, as soon as click on save button, I wanted to update another field. If that is an immediate action that you need to do it, then do not go with the future method. But there is a something which you can wait it. Something you can wait. Those jobs only we can schedule it as a asynchronous. So that is the main scenario. Whether synchronous does care whether my asynchronous ran perfectly or not, don't worry about it. Whenever it is failed completely here. So the logic which you are writing it, if you are calling asynchronous from the synchronous, logic has to be very smart. We have to write it in smart way, so that there is no updates in the synchronous. And here in the future call, if you wanted to do any updates where we do not require immediate action, then we can do it. Otherwise, what will happen if you are doing some updates and suddenly both are running in two parallel threads, and you are updating here and maybe some data you are updating, suddenly the future method has some error, it error out. So what will happen, your data updated, but the backend, your code is given the error while executing the future method. Clear?
Even though the future method fails, the synchronous will continue in the separate threads. That's what you're saying, Swapna?
Because those two are different threads, right?
Yes, but we are involving those two asynchronous process in synchronous process, right? We are calling that futures methods into non-future, that is synchronous methods.
See, ultimately, as soon as your thread is failed to execute it, the complete class is going to fail.
Yes.
Thread is failed means complete class is going to fail.
Even though we got a error in the method one, that is we are annotated with future, so the entire class will fail, right?
Yes. So why do we use the future method? Like whenever developer take a decision to run the code parallelly or asynchronously, then the developer use the future method. So that is the main thing. And it's like if you wanted to wait for the long execution, you have some jobs which you need a long execution. So those scenarios also we use the future method in the real time.
Swapna, any real-time example on this?
Right. So for example, so when you say real-time example, like I'll give you most nearest scenario. Okay. So let's assume that I'll take the standard object account and which has the child object called
Contact.
contact. Okay. And like we can create a one. Okay, I'll take this scenario. Roll up somebody you all know, right? Number of contact. Or else, let me think on. Okay. I have a dummy object. You can name it anything. One dummy object is there. So client is every quarter they are sending us a file. Sending a file which is related to the that file has a vehicle information. Okay. That file has a vehicle information. Okay. So this we have an actual object which is called as a vehicle object, right? But they do not want us to dump the file directly into the vehicle object. They do not want us to dump the file directly into the vehicle object because as soon as the record is created in the vehicle object, as soon as the record is created in the vehicle object, we wanted to trigger some outbound calls as well as we wanted to send an emails to the customer. Okay, as soon as the record is created in the vehicle object, I wanted to trigger an outbound call as well as we wanted to send an email to the whoever is the user is that we wanted to send. Right, on this vehicle object, we already have a trigger and lightning flows, all are there. Now, when they give us the file, okay, anyway, I have to do the data loading. I have to do the data loading because I cannot, we do not know what kind of a data they will give, right? So I have to do the data loading, import as well as the update. If there is a existing ID, I need to update that record. If it is a new one, I wanted to update it. As soon as the data is loaded into the dummy object, okay, we wanted to have this dummy object data reference to the customer. They wanted to view this information. So what will happen? Ideally, assume that if you do not have a dummy object, what you will do, you will load it into the vehicle object, right? When you load it into the vehicle object, immediately it will trigger to call the outbound calls and it will send the email. So what will happen? If I have a 10,000 records, if I have a 10,000 records or some 1 lakh records are there, it will keep on running at the back end because I'm directly pushing into the vehicle object. It will directly run into the backend and saying that it will block entire the process. And if somebody is updating anything here, then it is going to block and it will stop any other batches also there. It will stop executing there because entire performance will be running at the backend to calling the outbound and sending an email. And we have some other issues with the related to vehicle objects. So in those scenario, what they wanted to do is there is a dummy object which we have to create it, load it here because there is no trigger here. No trigger, no process builder, no lightning flows, nothing is.
Swapna?
Yeah.
So we are not getting proper voice from your end. It's breaking.
There is a network issue here, power cut here, power outage. Are you able to hear me now?
No, we are able to hear, but in the middle of the explanation, your voice is breaking.
Let's do this example tomorrow. Okay, I'll give you the real-time scenario tomorrow. Because there is a power cut here, we'll continue tomorrow. But till this point, any questions on the properties, execution of the future method?
Actually, I have one question.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we call a bash class to the future method?
Calling one class from another class, calling the queueable class from the future method calling the queueable, batch class calling the future method, batch class calling the queueable. Can I call it from the trigger? Can I call it from the batch class? This everything I'll explain with the example tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Okay. The rest of the thing is clear. No. Okay. Thank you.
So probably tomorrow we'll do 12 to 1 session. Okay. Yeah, we'll schedule it for tomorrow 12 to 1. We'll discuss about the real-time scenario, how it is there. I'll repeat the same thing tomorrow.
Okay, sir. It is better.
Okay. Okay, Shapna.
Yeah, thank you. So the last class, we have been discussing about the future method, right? And we understood the definition, how to write the main structure of the future class. And if I call the future method from the synchronous, how the execution is happened. So like we have seen this example yesterday. Further, we were discussing about the real-time scenario, how the real-time scenarios will be for the future effects. Right. So before I go to the real-time, so I think we all are clear. Why do we use the future method? Why do we use the future method? This might be the interview question. Why do we use it? Because whenever we have a long run or in other direction, whenever a developer take a decision, it's all depending on the developer how to run that. So if your requirement says that it would take longer time, so it's up to you which one you wanted to go, batch class or future method or queueable, whatever you take a decision. Based on that, we run the code parallelly. Code parallelly. Or asynchronously. So only that scenario we use the future method. But whenever we run the future, whenever we try to execute this future method, the future method, one of the property is whenever the resources are available at the backend, whenever the resources are available, only that time it will run the future method. That means based on the, we have a properties on top. Yeah. So based on the resource availability, this will get executed. The future method get executed. This is good. Okay. So based on the resource availability, the future method gets executed. As I mentioned yesterday, if you want to immediately, if you are expecting or client is expecting the immediate result, then we do not push the code to the asynchronous queue because client is waiting for the result. But whenever we are waiting, like there is no urgency on the data, client is not waiting for that. In those such scenarios, we run the code in the asynchronous queue. So coming to the real-time scenario, there are multiple ways we have a real-time scenario. Like you can take a decision as a developer. So one of the scenario is you can use the future annotation when making the asynchronous web call out. Like there is a requirement which we need to call out the web service. So first scenario is if we have any requirement on the web call out, any requirement on the web call out, or it's a web service call out to an external service. Mostly these kind of the scenarios we use the future method. That means let's assume that there is a requirement which says that upon creating a lead, like we are getting a lead from Facebook. Okay, from Facebook I'm getting a lead. Upon creating a lead, there is a requirement to call SFMC. That means Marketing Cloud. We have a Salesforce Marketing Cloud, right? There is a requirement which says that as soon as the lead is created, we wanted to call the Marketing Cloud so that they are going to do some calculation. Based on that, they will send an emails to the customer. Right? In this case, client is need not to wait for this. He can just create a lead and leave for it. He will go to the Facebook. He saw some advertisement and he added his username, first name, last name, address, all those things, and he clicked on the submit button. Right? That's what he wanted. Like whatever the user is there, that's what he the user wanted to do. But whether do I need to receive an email? Ideally, we will not wait for the emails for some scenarios, right? So in those scenarios, what we can do here, we can use the future method. As soon as the lead is created, we can have a trigger. Inside the trigger, how to do that, I'll explain that later. Inside the trigger, I can call a future method. So that future method will send an email or calling a API as marketing cloud. I'll be calling the marketing cloud based on some calculation or record type, based on some condition. We will call the marketing cloud and send the JSON structure to the marketing cloud, so that from there marketing cloud is going to take a time to send an email. So this will go on. This is one scenario. Another scenario is we have a partner contacts, right? You all might be aware of the partner contact, like in case your project is having a partner community, then ideally you will be having a partner accounts or partner contact will be there. Okay. So when we get the partner contact, or when it is created the contact or the account is created, okay, for this contact, for this partner contact, as soon as the contact is created, I wanted to create a user within the Salesforce. Within the Salesforce, I wanted to create a user for this partner contact. In those scenarios also, I can use the future method. So as soon as the contact is created, the future gets executed and it will wait for the resources. Whenever the resources are available, it immediately executes the future method in order to create a user for that particular contact, and it will link the user to the contact. This is one scenario. And another scenario, like we have a queues, right? We have a queue. Everybody is aware of. I think if you have gone through the admin, you will know that queues, groups, public groups, everything, right? So there is a queue. If you go to the setup and if you search, you will understand. Let me go there. Like if you search here queue, so you will see the queues, right? So I'm talking about these queues. So the requirement is for each partner contact, for each partner account, I wanted to create a queue. Because whenever I create a queue, it will be assigned to the certain users and objects, right? Object and user. Certain users I can give the access, and only few objects I can make sure that it is visible to that particular queue, right? So in those scenario, like we got this kind of a scenario where it says that as soon as the partner account is created, we want a queue to be created. Whenever the partner account is created, then create a queue if it does not exist. This is the high level they are going to give us. Now, what are the conditions we have to check it? We have, as a developer, we need to decide it, the condition and what should meet the criteria, everything we have to define. Okay, these are the real-time scenarios, and there are many are there, like we use the future method. For data loading also, sometimes we use the future method. For data loading, whenever I do the data loading on dummy object, so based on that record is inserted, then if I wanted to trigger any other thing, in those scenarios, we will use the future method. Coming to the interview questions on the future method. So they will ask, why do we use future method? So you can say that We can call the future method for executing the long running operations. Or you can say that for web services call out or external web services, if I wanted to call external web services or any operation we would like to run in our own thread. It does not need a customer to wait there. So only those scenarios we will use the future method. And the another question can come up. They will ask you to write a code. Can you write the syntax of the future method? Can you write the syntax of the future method? How can you write it? It's simple, straightforward. You have to first declare the class and add a method. And on top of that method, just add an annotation @future. So that is a skeleton structure of that. And they might ask you what kind of a parameters we can pass. What kinds of parameters? What kinds of parameters supported in future method? What kinds of parameters supported in future method? We already discussed. S object, standard object, custom object arguments cannot, future method cannot support it. If I have to pass the data, we have to pass it in the primitive data type or array of data type or collection of data type. In case if you want to pass the custom object data, then you have to pass it in the collection primitive data. Capture the IDs and pass it to the future method. So that way we can pass it. In another way, if you do not want to pass the IDs, you want to pass the entire object. So what you can do is you can everything put it into the JSON.string file. So whenever you are passing a data, so let's assume that, just a second. So for example, so I have a account details, okay? Let's take an example of account, okay? So whenever the account is inserted or updated, what we do usually in the trigger, okay, we have not gone through the trigger topic. So how do we get the new data for the record? We usually use the trigger.new in the trigger. We'll explain, we'll come to that topic, trigger.new. Okay, so what we'll do is from the new record, trigger.new means I'm going to capture the new record. So whatever the data that is there, that is entered or created, or while creating the whatever the user has entered the data, entire data will be stored into the trigger.new. Now, if you wanted to pass it to the future method, this entire data, how can we pass it? Simply use the JSON.serialize. JSON.serialize. And then in the bracket, you pass the trigger.new. So what will happen when you pass this? When you pass this, what will happen? Here the parameter will be string. Parameter will be because JSON is a string. So it will be expected as a string, JSON string. Okay, parameter will be the string. So what is the JSON.serialize will do? JSON.serialize is basically, it will convert your object, whatever the object is there, it will convert the object data into the string format, into the string, right? When we use the JSON.serialize. So what will happen? Entire data will be stored as a string, right? So it will be name, comma, first name, comma, last name, comma, everything is in the string, right? But in case if you have a string format, there is some batch class or something is there. Okay, if you have a data, everything in the string, and you wanted to parse, you wanted to convert. In those scenarios, what we use is deserialize we use. Deserialization is nothing but converting the string to the object. It is opposite direction. Or deserialization, whatever. So deserialization is the opposite of serialize. Okay, so deserialization will convert the string to the object. So that way we can pass the data to the future method. If you want ID, take the ID, but if you want the complete data you want, take it as a JSON.serialize so that it will convert everything into the string. And in the future method, expect the parameter as a string JSON string. Okay, so data type will be string. So that is the another interview question. And like they might ask you when you answer this question, they might ask you why S object type parameter are not supported. Why it is not supported? So they are happy with the previous one. Now they will ask you the counter question saying that why it is not accepted. What is the reason behind it? The reason behind of this is why S object can be passed as an argument to the future method, because the future method is going to run in the future, or based on the resources it is going to execute it. Sometimes what will happen that you pass the S object data to the future method, but it is possible that there is some changes between now to the whenever the future method is executed. In between there is some data might have updated in the S object, so it will not take the latest changes of the S object. Whatever you have passed it, let's assume that you are running a class. Okay, you are running a class, you started the class at executing that class at 1:30. Okay, now future method is executed at 1:35 or 1:40, because that time it saw that resources are free. Between 1:30 to 1:40, possible that there should be some changes might happen on the S object. For those latest S object, future method is not aware, because future method is not talking directly to the object. It is not talking to the data directly. Whatever you passed it to the future method, it will consider only that. But if somebody is updated in between that time, it will be impacted, right? That is going to be the client issue or data issue. Data issue means that is going to be the huge issue. So that's the reason S object type parameter are not supported to the future method. And they might ask you in those scenario, what could be the like alternate or workaround scenario? What could be the workaround of S object type? So you can pass it in the collection data type, or you can pass it in the primitive data type, array data type, array primitive data type, simple primitive data type, or collection data type. So maximum these questions can come up from the future method. Okay. Take a notes for the assignment. So let's say that create a future method to count how many cases are created through phone or web or email, and update that or put the count in the account record. So whenever the case is created in the Salesforce, so whenever the cases are created in the Salesforce, there is a one field which says that how this case is created, right? So it could be a web, or it could be an email, or it could be a phone. So we wanted at the end, in a day, how many, whatever the cases are created, okay, whatever the cases are created, I wanted to see from where the cases are coming, the highest cases from which is coming, from the phone, from the email, or from the web, right? So that I wanted to capture. So total count of the phone. So that means on the account, you have to create a 3 fields. You need to create a 3 fields. One is count of phone cases, and another one is count of email cases, and another one count of web cases. And this, keep it as a number data type, because we are storing the numbers, right? Create these 3 fields and write a future method to count the total cases that are created today. So that means you have to query the cases that are created today and loop through that complete list and identify how many are phone, how many are web, how many are email. And then you calculate and count it, and at the end that count update into the account. Clear on the assignment? Any questions? So for anything, interview questions or passing the data to the future method, any question before I move on to the next topic?
For this future method is required, Swapna, or we can implement in other way also.
This one you can implement multiple ways. See, any requirement which comes on will have a different options. But right now, why I'm giving this assignment, so that you will get used to the future method. You can implement this in the batch class. You can implement this in the lightning flows. You can implement this in the trigger or on update, on insert. You can update this. Lightning flows also, you can execute this. There are different ways. So in Salesforce has that one open thing. Whenever the requirement comes, it suits for implementing the trigger, implementing the lightning flow, implementing the future method, implementing in the batch class, implementing in the queueable method. Everything is possible. So that's the reason sometimes they ask a question in the interview, I have this requirement, and which all the possible way you go for it. And they will ask, why do you go for future method? Why do you go for queueable method? So this conversation will continue in the interview for almost 10 minutes. So we'll have a different options. It's all based on the developer, how they wanted to implement it. But it's depending on you, how best you are implementing as a developer. But right now, this, whatever I'm giving the assignment, do it with the future method, so that you will know that how the execution is happening and how it is running out. And you will be knowing that how to, the structure, hands-on experience, you will get it.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Any other question? Somebody raised a hand. Any questions? Akhil, any questions? I see that you raised a hand. Okay, so fine. Next topic is queuable apex. Okay. So next topic is queuable apex. Now queuable apex this is also one of the type in the asynchronous. One of the type in the asynchronous. And this is the last topic in the asynchronous apex. What is a queuable apex? Queuable apex is basically it enables to add a job to an asynchronous queue. What will happen with this? With the status monitoring. So that is the main thing why we use the queuable. The queuable apex is it enables to add the job. Whatever the code we write, if I execute the queuable apex, immediately it will add the job. That means one job ID gets created for the queuable apex. And based on that, I can monitor what is the status of this queuable apex. What is the status of this queuable apex? So what are the properties while implementing the queuable apex? So one is it will have the monitoring asynchronous queue, and this can also go into the chaining jobs. We will talk about the chaining jobs. And at the end, whenever we run the queuable apex, what will happen? It will return the job ID. So based on the job ID, I can know that what is the status of job. Is it running, pending, or executing, queued? We will know that. So it will return the job ID. And whenever we are implementing the queuable apex, we have to use the implement queuable interface. Implement queuable interface. Right? For the scheduled one, we have to use the schedulable interface. You remember scheduled one, we use the schedulable interface. The structure is same for the schedulable interface and queuable interface. Only thing is that difference is we will be using for the queuable apex, we will be using the interface called queuable. When it comes to the schedulable, we use the interface called schedulable. So now the structure is public class and any class name, and then you have to use the implement queuable. Inside this, only one execute method will be there. Because as soon as I create this implement queuable, what will happen? It is going to throw me an error saying that you do not have an execute method. So execute method, inside that you have to use the queuable context. And you can use anything here, the variable. Let's take QC. So this is the structure. See, this is similar to the scheduled apex. If you remember schedulable apex, it is similar to that. But here we use a different interface. There we use a different interface. Right? So let me execute, let me create a one sample one. Let's go to the developer console. File, open resource. First, let me check the scheduled one. Here it is. Okay, do you see here implement schedulable context? Same thing. Now, if I try to implement a queuable interface, I have to use the interface queuable. So let's take a CL underscore 0107, right? And what we are doing it, we are implementing the queuable apex. Perfect. Now class name is created. Now I wanted to implement queuable interface, right? As soon as I do the implements, it is going to expect me to write a method, execute method, queuable.execute, right? So public void execute queuable context. I can use anything. Let's say that CON. Okay. Now this is the structure. What is happening? Let's say something is wrong. Context. Okay, so this is the structure. Now I can write the same logic, whatever we did it in the schedulable, I can write it here. Right, same thing I'm doing it. But while executing what we do for the schedulable, what we did, system dot, we executed using the system dot, right? And inside this, let's say that schedule system updated by queuable. Right, while executing what we do, we have to initialize the object. Let's say that QA equal to new class name, right? So while executing the queuable system dot, what we have to use enqueue job. So what will happen as soon as I run this, there is a one job gets created. But in case if you wanted to know here, what is the job that you wanted to, that is assigned to this execution, assign your system.enqueue job to the one ID. Let's say that QID equal to system.enqueue job and pass that class name here. And you can print the system.debug, print the QID. Okay, execute. There is a log gets created and we'll have the ID number. Here's the ID number. Okay, so here is the ID number. See, every asynchronous will have the another log. This is a synchronous part and this is asynchronous. Everyone will have the logs. 2 logs at least will be there if you are writing the asynchronous. Now using this job ID, I can query asynchronous jobs. Select ID comma status. I just wanted to know the status from. We have a object called async apex job. Async apex job where ID equal to this job ID. Let's execute this. It's completed. Status is completed. So if you go to the jobs also, you will see that. Let's go to the setup. Job. Schedule job. Apex job. Today queueable, right? So apex jobs will be queueable jobs will be in the apex job. So it says that there is a created here. One job ID gets created and we can monitor the thing. Fine. Go back here. So if you have a question, only one method do I need to implement in the queueable class? It's not mandatory. You have to go with the one method, but if you are if you are implementing the queueable interface, execute method is expected. But if you wanted to write any other methods, you can do that. Public class, sorry, public void you can write any method, like any method, and you can write here the business logic. What are the business logic you have? You can write it like as many as methods you can implement it. But if you want this method to be executed, then you have to call it from the execute method. Or once all the logic is completed in the execute method, you can call that method, or starting of the execute method also you can call here the another method so that it will get executed. So there is a no restriction on the how many methods can we create on the queueable apex. So we can create as many as, but the mandatory is execute method is mandatory. And if we wanted to call this method has to be called from the execute method. Now this is fine. But in case while executing the queueable method, I wanted to pass a record. Here what we are doing, we are querying everything, all the data. But I do not want to do all the data. I just wanted to take only that specific data which I wanted to update the records. Okay, so let me go to the Salesforce. So let's take the account, and the account object, if I go to the one of the record, we have something called parent account, right? So I have something called parent account. Now if I search something, this is one tick, Smita, I'm assigning it, right? So this is what it is happening. Now I wanted to do the same thing from the queueable patch. Instead of manual effort, I wanted to do it from batch class. So let's update the parent account ID in the account. So how can we do that? Here in this scenario, we have to update a specific account with the specific parent ID. So that means I cannot query all the accounts here. I need to pass while executing the queueable method. While executing the queueable method, I need to pass the list of accounts or whatever the one account or multiple account we wanted to update. I wanted to do that. So in those scenarios, what we do is we will implement the asynchronous. Sorry, we will implement the constructor. Constructor class will be implemented. Let me take new class CL underscore 0107 queueable with constructor, queueable with constructor, right? So let's implements queueable Now here public void execute, public void execute, queueable context. Let's take the variable name as context. Now inside this, what I wanted to do, I wanted to update the parent ID. Main logic, let's write it in the execute method. So what I'll do is for loop account so let me go through acc dot, let's take one variable acc list. Let's take this. So inside this I wanted to update acc dot parent ID equal to, I cannot hard code that ID here, right? Let me pass it from the outside, parent acc ID. Now at the end, what I can do, I can simply update the acc list. Perfect. Now what are the data is, what are the variables that I need to declare and what are the things that I needed in order to implement this logic? The first thing, I need to declare the acc list. I need to declare the account list. So let's go ahead and declare it here in the class public list of account acc list. Now what else I need? I need a parent acc ID. So this is a ID. So public ID equal to parent account ID. Okay, now whenever I'm executing it, it will refer this acc list here and the parent ID here. Now the thing is that I have to pass the data from outside of this class. I'm not querying anything here. Whenever I'm executing the queueable apex, I wanted to pass that data. So that means I need to have a constructor. I need to have a constructor. Public, how to write the constructor? We have already discussed public and the class name. And inside this, what I'm expecting in the constructor, I'm expecting the list of account records. Let's give it another name here, acc records. And also I'm expecting the parent ID. So that whatever I'm getting from the outside, I'll set it into the, in the local variable, in the class variable, whatever we have, I'll set it the same thing. So I'm getting from the outside, setting into the acc list, which is a local variable. Now again, this dot parent account ID equal to, what I'll do, I'll set the PID. Now nowhere else I'm querying here. So I'm getting everything from the outside. Everything I'm getting it from the outside. Perfect. Now this public is this, whatever these variables are there, collection variable, or this is a list variable, list as subject variable, right? So this acc list is used only within the class, right? We are not calling anything this from the outside, because whenever this class is called, I'm using the constructor and passing the data. So instead of the public, what I can do is I can use the private here, because this is only used within the class. I do not need outside of this. This need only within the class. So I can use simply private. So this class is ready, right? Now next thing, let me go to the developer anonymous window. Now what is the thing that I need? First I need to query the data, or I need to get the records. List of account acc list equal to, I just need a list. Select ID comma, I do not need any other information, any other fields, ID comma parent ID, only those two fields are enough for me right now. from account where ID equal to, for now I'll just update the one record. This is the record. Okay, let me refresh, make sure that there is no value here. Okay, there is no value, so I'll take this ID. So where ID equal to, I'll pass the hard coded for now. So I'll get the complete list. Now next thing what I need a parent account ID. So the data type for this is ID. Parent ID equal to, instead of direct, I can do this way, another way also. Let me show you that. Parent ID, which one I'm thinking this one. I can directly do this, or but here what will happen? Here everything will be taken as a string because this is in the quotation. So what I'll do is, this is the ID data type. So simply what I'll do, select ID from, I do not need any other fields, only ID is required for me. From account where the ID equal to this. Now this will give the record, but I do not need the record. I just need a dot ID. That's it. I'm querying this on the query. Whatever the first record is there, for that record, I'm getting the ID. So this ID is stored here. Now if you see system.debug, let's print the ACC list. And let's print the parent account ID also. Make sure that we are getting the values here. Okay, highlight this, execute. On first page, something is running at the back end. Execute the highlighted one. Okay. Hold on a second. What's happening here? That's fine. My Visual Force page is running, seems like. Okay. So here debug, I'm getting the ACC list ID, right? And also I'm getting the parent account ID. Here only ID, I'm getting the data because parent ID does not have the value. Though I'm querying the parent ID also, right? But here it did not give anything null or anything because there is no value to the parent ID. So that's the reason it did not print the parent ID. So this is perfect. Now let's go back to my queueable. Let's take this queueable. So let's say update job equal to new. What I need a account records ACC list I have to pass, and then I need a parent account ID. Fine. Next. How do we execute the queueable? System dot enqueue job. Enqueue jobs and pass the queueable class. And just to know that which job ID it is running it, ID equal to ID of job ID equal to system.enqueue. Now I can print the job ID, but that's okay. You have already seen that, right? Now let me execute this. Highlight, execute. Okay, it executed the two logs. Perfect. Now let me go there. Accounts, one tech, details. See, it updated the parent account. Right, so that's how we will run it. Right now, I ran it for one account, but you usually in the real time, like if we have a more than some, maybe more than 900 records or something, if you wanted to run, then we usually take just a second. Okay, so in the real time, again, it's depending on the developer decision here also. All the asynchronous, whatever we have, batch, schedulable, queueable, future, it's all depending on the developer decision which one to go on. But in the real-time scenario, let me give you the real-time scenario. In real-time scenario, let's say that we have the case object, right? On creation of case object, on creation of case record, call the API. That API could be a DocuSign, right? That could be any API. Could be a DocuSign, could be some other application which is dealing the contracts, the contracts, right? So what basically I wanted to cross verify is, as soon as the case is created, I wanted to check this particular account is already signed on the document or is already signed on the contract. If you go to the real estate, so what they will do is they will raise a case, okay? But before raising the case, they say that, okay, there is some issue here in the house or something is broken or some issue, they will raise it. But when they raise it, the first thing they wanted to check, did they already signed to stay in this house and they are eligible today to stay in this house or not? This is usually happens in the US because they will be having the contract, right? They will sign some contract to saying that I'll be in this house for 1 year. Okay, after 1 year, they are going to raise a ticket. If they raise a ticket, the first thing is that whether eligibility check, whether this person is eligible to stay in this home or not. And they will cross verify the sign and the date, end date, start date, everything they verify. And based on that, they will respond on that case. So this is the one of the scenario that in the real time on the case creation or whenever the case is created or whenever we updating the status from the new to the started or new to the in progress. That means agent has taken this case and he started looking into the case. When he changed the status to in progress, immediately I want verification. I want to cross verify the whatever the document or the contract is there. I wanted to get that information and update the verification field. On the case, I have a field called verification field. So we wanted to update the verification, eligible, not eligible are the two options. So we wanted to update these information. So in those scenarios, we use the queueable queueable method. We usually schedule the jobs and run it. So You might ask, can I not run the batch class? You think on it. See, I'll give you the real-time scenarios, but you think on it. Batch class is also possible, but you compare the process time using the batch class and using the queuable class. Using the batch class and queuable apex, which one you think that process is going to be the less, and which one is not going to disturb the other user while running this verification at the backend. So you have to take a decision as a developer. But this is one real-time scenario that we have worked on. And yeah, so in these scenarios also we use a queuable apex, and another scenario is like same thing, web callouts, web service callouts. If you wanted to send any information to another system, SAP or .NET, where they can wait, it's not an urgency. So you can use the queuable apex. Now coming to the interview questions on the queuable apex. So the first thing they will ask is, what is the difference between the queuable apex and future apex? What is the difference between the queuable apex and future method, or queuable method and future method? What is the difference between future method and queuable apex? Okay, because both are running in the asynchronous. Okay, both are running in the asynchronous. Same logic, whatever I did in the queuable apex, I can execute it here. But what is the main difference using the queuable? Or they might ask you in other directions, saying that what is the advantage? What is the advantage of queuable apex over the future method? What is the advantage we have using the queuable apex is, the first thing is, it will accept the non-primitive data. That means non-primitive type. So that means queuable class can contain a member variables of non-primitive data type, such as S object or custom object, anything you can pass it. When it comes to the future method, future method only accept the primitive data type. Could be a array primitive data type, could be a collection data type, but when it comes to the queuable, you can pass anything, primitive, non-primitive, S object, custom object, anything, standard object, anything you can pass it, right? That is one benefit. And next, second one is monitoring. Monitoring. Whenever you schedule whenever you run the queuable apex class, you know that there is a job ID that created, and you can track it running the query. You can monitor it. So basically, when you submitted the job by invoking the system.enqueue job method, right? That job method returns the ID. So based on the async apex job, which one is the object? Async apex job. Async apex job. Using this object, we can know the record and what is the status of that job, whether it is in progress, either completed or any error, or is it still in the queue, it did not run. So we know the status of the job. And next thing is that using the queueable, it is possible of chaining the jobs. Means you all know chaining means one other one connected, right? So it's kind of a chain. Chaining the job. So you can chain one job to another job by starting the second job from running the job. Usually chaining jobs is useful when you need to do some sequential processing. Like you have some steps like a person needs to be updated account, then case, then contact. If you have these kind of a scenarios or some other different scenarios, whenever you wanted to update a sequential processing, then you can use the queueable apex so that it will run as a chain. So that is the first question they might ask you. And the next one, what is the interface that we are, what is the interface is used while implementing the apex, queueable apex? What is the interface used for queueable apex? What is the interface? Queueable interface. And the next one is what are methods used in the queueable apex? They might confuse you here because they might say that I will create 10 methods, what will happen, like that they will say that. But if we are using the interface queueable, execute method is mandatory. Execute method is mandatory. Apart from the execute method, you can implement n number of methods. There is no restriction on how many methods will be executed. But if you want the other methods to be executed, then that method has to be called from the execute method. Right? And the next one, like they might ask you some scenario based also, like when you use the future method, when you use the queueable method. So both are same. Whenever we use the future and queueable, both are same. But remember that if I use the queueable, I'll have a more flexibility. As a developer, I'll have a more flexibility where I can track and monitor the job, and a queueable will be more flexible of accepting the parameters instead of just restricting to the primitive data type. So you can say that. So that is the one question. What will, like when will we use future method and or queueable method? Okay, and that's all. I do not remember any other thing. They might ask you another question. How can you track the job? How can you track or trace the job? How do we do that? Just running the SQL query, SQL query on the async apex job. I think that's all. That's all I have. That's all can come up. Interface, methods, constructor. They might ask you this. Okay, so one more interview question is, how do you execute queueable apex? How do you execute the queueable apex? Now, they might ask you counter question saying that if I have written more than one system.enqueue job, if I have written more than one system.enqueue job, what will happen? Ideally, we have to run only once. Ideally, I have to run only once. So what will happen if I try to run same job again and again for the same queueable apex? Simply it will throw an error. What error it will throw? It will throw too many queueable jobs. It will throw too many queueable jobs added in the queue, added to the queue. And they will give you the count. It will give you the count. Right? And as per the Garner limits, we can add up to 50 jobs. Garner limit is you can add up to the we can add up to 50 jobs to the queue. With system.enqueue job in single transaction. In single transaction, we can add up to 50 jobs to the queue. That's all. And coming to the assignment. Okay. So on top, what is the scenario that I gave for the account? Okay. Queueable. Let's take this scenario. In real time, there will be another scenario. Okay, so what they will do is, like we have a production, right? Production org. Okay, sometimes we create a dev org, which is a copy of production. Copy of production. We create a, because for the developer purpose, we create a new org. This is a new Salesforce org, which is a dev org. We create, which is exactly copy of the production. So when we create a copy of the production, sometimes what happens is user records and profile records will also be get copied into the dev. Right? Whenever we create exact copy of the production org, we also get the users, we also get the profile. So in those scenario, whenever we do this kind of a step, once the org is created for the developer purpose, deactivate all the users for this particular profile. There might be some profile, ABC profile. Okay, that ABC is some partner. Okay, for this profile, whatever the users are there, because whenever it copied from the production, it copied as an active. It will copy as an active users, but we do not need in the dev. So what we will do is we can write one queueable job. Okay, so as soon as the copy is created, execute that queueable apex. So it will automatically take care of deactivating the users for that particular profile. That is also another scenario in the real time. So coming to the assignment queueable apex. Okay, we have a case object. Okay, so on the case object, let's go to the case object. Create a one field here in the case object. Create a field in the case object, which is called verify the data. Okay, so wherever the case status is new, okay, wherever the case status is new and case origin is a web, case origin is a web and status is new, then update that particular field. This is a pick list field. Pick list field values are verified and not verified. So whenever the case status is new and origin is web, then update that verify the data field. Update this field to the verified. In case if this does not match, if status is in progress and origin is web, then not verified. Only if this combination matches, then update the verified. Run it for all the case object. Any questions on this? Is it clear on the assignment and queueable apex interview questions?
Swapna, we need the notes. What are you are explaining on daily basis?
Oh, you are not taking the notes when I'm explaining it? Okay.
Yes. The running notes is okay. In-depth explanation is there or not?
Okay. Fine, I'll send that also. So these assignments, will you able to do this for the future method and queueable method?
The queueable we need to check, Swapna. If anything required, we will approach you.
Okay, yeah, sure. And coming to the trailhead. There is a module on the asynchronous. Yeah, asynchronous apex module. Complete this entire module. because we covered everything: future, batch, queueable, schedulable, monitoring this asynchronous apex. Everything we covered it. So go through this module and complete this module. Okay, so you will get a more clarity on that. Okay, then, yeah, we'll meet tomorrow. We'll discuss further topics, like how to call chaining jobs, where to call a queueable future job, batch effects. So these all we'll discuss tomorrow. So today we are already 1 hour over.